I overheard my son-in-law planning to move his parents into my house, the home I built with my bare hands. That night, I decided to vanish. Quietly. Completely. I wasn't supposed to hear that conversation. It was late afternoon, sunlight slipping through the half-drawn curtains, dust floating in golden beams. I had just come back from my walk, 3 blocks down to the bakery and back, when I heard voices in the kitchen. My daughter Emily and her husband, Daniel. At first, I thought they were talking about groceries or bills. But when I heard my name, I stopped. Their voices were muffled, but the tone, sharp, impatient, told me enough. I leaned slightly against the wall, careful not to make the old floorboards creak. "He's lived here long enough," Daniel said, his voice firm. "It's time my parents move in. They need the space." "But Dad built this house," Emily whispered. "It's his home." "He'll understand," Daniel replied, a pause following that sentence like a knife held in the air. "He can move to one of those senior places. They're nice." I remember standing there, my heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was the house I'd built with my hands 40 years ago. Every nail, every beam, every rose bush in the garden carried a memory: my late wife's laughter, Emily's first steps, the smell of Sunday pancakes. And now it was being discussed like a piece of real estate. I stepped back quietly, my cane tapping once against the wooden floor. Just once, but it was enough. Silence followed from the kitchen. Then Emily's voice, shaky. "Dad, is that you?" I took a deep breath and forced a smile when I entered the room. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," I said softly. "I was just getting some water." Daniel's face tightened, that polite smile of his barely hiding the irritation beneath. He was a man who always spoke like he was closing a deal, even with family. "Mr. Harding," he said, "we were just discussing some changes that might benefit everyone." "Changes," I repeated, setting down my glass. "Like moving me out of my own house." Emily's eyes welled up. "Dad, it's not like that." "It's exactly like that," Daniel interrupted. "You're getting older. You need comfort, assistance. My parents could use the space. It's practical." Practical. That word cut deeper than any insult. I looked at my daughter, my only child, and saw the guilt on her face. She'd changed since marrying Daniel. Softer voice, less laughter, more hesitation. Like she was walking through life apologizing for her existence. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my workshop, the one place Daniel never entered. The smell of sawdust still lingered from my last project, a rocking chair I'd been crafting for Emily's future child. My hands rested on the unfinished wood, trembling slightly. I thought of my wife, Margaret. She would have known what to say. She always did. But she'd been gone 8 years now. The silence of the house felt heavier than ever. Around midnight, I made tea and sat by the window. Outside, the porch light glowed faintly. Across the yard, Daniel's car was parked arrogantly close to the garden. My garden. I remembered when he first came into Emily's life. Charming, ambitious, the kind of man who always looked at people as opportunities. I had misjudged him. By dawn, I had made my decision. Quiet. Simple. Irrevocable. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't fight. I wouldn't cry in front of them. They wanted my house. They could have it empty. I'd make sure they'd never get what they truly wanted. That morning, while Emily and Daniel were still asleep, I pulled an old file from the cabinet, property documents, insurance papers, and a small envelope my wife had once labeled for rainy days. I smiled faintly. "It's pouring now, Margaret," I whispered. When I stepped outside, the sunrise lit the sky in a pale orange hue. The air smelled of cold dew and blooming roses. I felt old, yes, but for the first time in years alive. They thought I was a helpless old man. They had no idea I still had a few tricks left. And so, while the house still slept, I got into my dusty truck and drove to the town's notary office. It was time to start disappearing. The morning I decided to sell the house, the air felt heavier, almost charged with a quiet electricity. Maybe it was just my nerves, but as I drove down to the notary's office, every street corner I passed seemed to whisper, "Are you sure?" I was. I'd built that house with my own hands. But now it was poisoned, filled with Daniel's plans and Emily's hesitation. I couldn't breathe inside it anymore. If they wanted to take it from me, I'd make sure they'd never get the satisfaction. When I walked into the notary's office, Ms. Harper, a woman in her late 50s with gray hair pulled into a bun, looked up from her desk and smiled faintly. "Mr. Harding," she greeted. "Haven't seen you in a while." What brings you here? Selling the house, I said simply. Her smile faded. Oh, the Harding residence? Are you sure? Quite. She studied me for a moment, like she could see through the calm in my voice. You've lived there all your life. Too long, I replied, setting the folder on her desk. Let's get the paperwork started. By noon, everything was in motion. I had listed it quietly, through private channels. No public posting, no neighbors asking questions. I even asked Harper to keep it discreet. She nodded, understanding. You want this clean, she said softly. No traces. Exactly. That night, I sat in my workshop again, staring at the wooden chair I'd been making for my unborn grandchild. My tools lay scattered across the bench, a life's collection of chisels, hammers, sandpaper, and patience. I could still hear my wife's voice echoing in my memory. You can fix anything, Tom, as long as you take your time. But some things can't be fixed, only left behind. Over the next few days, I played my role perfectly. I was the same quiet old man, watering the garden, feeding the stray cat that visited my porch, nodding to the mailman. Emily and Daniel noticed nothing. Daniel had even started showing his parents around the property. They came by one afternoon, a couple in their 60s, polite but arrogant, their smiles stretched too tight. Daniel guided them around like a proud tour guide, explaining where they'd set up their reading nook or open up space for a new couch. I watched from the upstairs window, my jaw tight, my hands trembling not from age but from anger. When they left, I sat at my desk and wrote a short note. It wasn't a letter of revenge, just closure. It read, Emily, I hope one day you understand. Some homes are built with love, not just wood and nails. Love doesn't survive greed. Take care of yourself. I folded it neatly and placed it in an envelope on my nightstand. 3 days later, Miss Harper called. It's done, she said. The house is sold. Cash transaction. Buyer wishes for immediate transfer. I exhaled slowly. Perfect. That evening, while Emily and Daniel were out, I packed. Just the essentials, clothes, some photos, my old tool set, and my wife's locket. I walked through every room one last time. In the living room, I ran my hand over the mantel where our family photos once stood. In the kitchen, I could still see Emily as a child, standing on a stool, helping Margaret bake cookies. In the garden, the roses glowed under the porch light, the same ones I had planted for my wife on her birthday. I whispered, Goodbye, Margaret, and felt the wind answer through the leaves. By midnight, the truck was loaded. I left the keys on the kitchen counter with the note and locked the door from the outside for the last time. The moon hung low, pale and quiet. My reflection stared back at me from the truck window, an old man with tired eyes. Yes, but not broken. For the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own life again. I drove west. No destination, no plan. Just the open road and a wallet full of cash from the sale. Somewhere around dawn, I stopped at a gas station outside a small coastal town. The clerk looked at me with mild curiosity. Long trip, he asked. Just leaving home, I replied. He nodded without understanding. I found a small motel near the water, the kind that smelled faintly of salt and old paint. The woman at the desk, Mrs. Lane, gave me a room key with a gentle smile. Room 5, she said. Ocean view if you squint. That night, I stood on the balcony, watching the waves crash in the distance. The sea air felt raw and alive. I hadn't felt this kind of peace in years. But as the calm settled, another thought began to gnaw at me. Emily. She'd wake up tomorrow to an empty house. Would she cry? Would she understand? Or would Daniel twist the story, as he always did, turning my quiet departure into a selfish act? I didn't know. All I knew was that, for the first time in a long while, Daniel didn't own the board anymore. And the next move was mine. The sun had barely risen when the phone started ringing. I ignored it at first, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling beside me. I knew who it was. By the third call, I answered. Dad? Dad, where are you? Emily's voice cracked through the receiver, trembling and frantic. The house, what happened? Everything's gone. The furniture, the pictures, there's a sold sign in the yard. I closed my eyes. Her panic wasn't unexpected, but hearing it still twisted something deep in me. I sold it, I said quietly. Didn't Daniel tell you he wanted to move his parents in? I just made things easier. There was silence on the line. Then a choked whisper. Dad, why would you do that? Because, sweetheart, I said, I didn't build that house for strangers to live in while I watched from a nursing home. I could almost hear her tears through the static. You didn't even say goodbye. I left you a note, I replied. She didn't answer for a few seconds. Then came Daniel's voice in the background, sharp, angry, like a whip. Ask him where the money is. He sold our house. Our, I muttered, my tone hardening. That was never your house, Daniel. You didn't lay a single brick. Emily hesitated. He's just upset, Dad. No, Emily, I interrupted gently. He's angry because he lost something that was never his to begin with. I hung up before she could respond. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. I hated ending it like that, but there was nothing left to explain. The next day, I walked into town. The coastal air was brisk, smelling of salt and pine. I bought a small notebook and started writing. Not letters, not confessions, just thoughts. It helped keep me steady. I didn't run away, I wrote. I simply stepped aside from people who stopped seeing me as family. At night, I'd sit on the motel balcony, watching the lights of fishing boats flicker on the horizon. I thought about Emily constantly. I remembered her as a little girl, running barefoot through the garden, laughing while I sprayed her with the hose. She used to say, "Daddy, you'll never be old." I smiled bitterly at the memory. Children always believe their fathers are immortal. By the third day, I got another call. This time, it was Daniel. His tone was sharp, controlled, but I could sense the desperation beneath. "Mr. Harding," he began, "you've made a serious mistake. That property was mine," I interrupted. "It was your family's home," he snapped. "Now my parents have nowhere to go. You've made Emily miserable. Do you realize how selfish this is?" Selfish. The word almost made me laugh. "Daniel, you tried to push me out of my own home. You treated me like a burden. So forgive me if I didn't prioritize your parents' comfort." He went quiet for a moment, then hissed, "You'll regret this. You think disappearing solves anything? You've humiliated us." "Good," I said softly. "Now you know how it feels." I ended the call. 2 days later, I saw them. I was walking through the town square, carrying a bag of groceries, when I noticed a familiar car parked near the pier. Daniel's shiny black SUV. They'd come looking for me. I ducked into a small cafe and took a seat by the window, pretending to read the newspaper. From there, I watched them, Daniel pacing impatiently, Emily standing beside him, her face pale and drawn. She looked smaller somehow, fragile. He was on the phone, gesturing angrily, probably yelling at some lawyer or real estate agent, trying to trace the sale. But he wouldn't find much. The buyer was private, the paperwork clean, and my money already moved through a trust Margaret and I had set up decades ago. Then Emily looked up. Her eyes swept across the street and landed right on the cafe window. For a heartbeat, our gazes met. She froze. Then slowly, she started walking toward the door. My chest tightened. I wanted to run, to hide, but my legs didn't move. When she entered, the tiny bell above the door chimed. She stood there, eyes red from crying. "Dad, sit down, sweetheart," I said gently. She did. The silence between us was heavy, thick with things neither of us knew how to say. "Daniel doesn't understand," she began quietly. "He thinks you're trying to hurt us." "I'm not trying to hurt you," I said. "I'm trying to free you." Her brow furrowed. "Free me? You've changed since marrying him," I said. "You walk on eggshells around him. You agree to everything, even when it breaks your heart. That house was the last thing connecting you to who you used to be." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Dad, I didn't want to choose sides." "You didn't have to," I whispered. "I made the choice for both of us." She covered her face with her hands, shaking. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere the road takes me." I smiled faintly. "Maybe somewhere quiet. Maybe somewhere I can still build something with my hands." Emily reached across the table and took my hand. Small, trembling, familiar. "Please, don't disappear completely." I squeezed her fingers gently. "You know where to find me. But don't tell him." She nodded, eyes glistening with pain and understanding. Then she stood, wiped her tears, and left. I watched her walk back to Daniel, who looked furious. She said something, I couldn't hear what, and then got into the passenger seat without looking at him. As they drove away, I exhaled slowly. My chest hurt, but not from regret, from relief. For the first time, Emily had looked at me not with pity, but with something like respect. That night, I packed my things again. I'd stay one more day, then move farther down the coast. The past was catching up too quickly, and my quiet revenge, though simple, had only just begun. Because Daniel thought I'd vanished. He didn't yet realize I'd left him something far more dangerous than an empty house. I'd left him a mystery he couldn't control. For the next 2 weeks, I moved from town to town, never staying long enough for anyone to remember my name. I wasn't running, I was watching. Through small-town newspapers, online property listings, and a few old connections in the real estate office, I kept quiet track of my former home. Or rather, of Daniel's chaos. It didn't take long before the consequences began to unfold. According to Ms. Harper, the notary, Daniel had returned to her office 3 days after the sale. He was furious, waving papers, shouting about illegal transactions and family betrayal. She had told him calmly that everything was done by the book and that the rightful owner, Thomas Harding, had sold his property willingly. "He left you nothing to dispute, Mr. Cole," she had said, as she later told me over the phone. "And nothing to claim." Daniel's ego couldn't stand that. One evening, while I was staying in a small coastal cabin near Marlow Bay, I saw Emily's name flash on my phone again. I hesitated before answering. "Dad," she said quietly. Her voice sounded tired, thinner than before. "He's been losing it. He's called every lawyer he knows. He even accused me of hiding you somewhere." "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said after a pause. "But his parents moved into our apartment, just until they find something better," Daniel said. "The place feels suffocating." I clenched my jaw. "That's not your burden, Emily." She exhaled shakily. "I know. I wish you told me. Maybe we could have figured something out." "Would you have believed me?" I asked gently. "Or him?" There was silence. Only the sound of distant waves and her uneven breathing on the line. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered finally. "I know you are," I said softly. "But don't be sorry for me. I'm free now. You need to free yourself too." Before she could reply, a muffled male voice barked in the background. Daniel, calling her name. I heard the familiar steel edge in his tone. "I have to go," she said quickly. "Hill." The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the dark window, the reflection of my weary face staring back. The revenge I had set in motion wasn't about money. It was never about making Daniel suffer financially. I wanted something deeper. I wanted him to feel powerless. And now, that was happening. A few days later, I decided to drive back, not home, but close enough to observe from afar. I parked at the edge of town, near an old service road overlooking the neighborhood. My house, their house, was no longer mine, of course. The new owners were a quiet, retired couple who'd already repainted the front porch and replaced the old swing with a flower bench. I was glad. The home was alive again, untouched by greed. But down the street, Daniel's SUV sat crooked in the driveway of their apartment building. I could see him pacing on the porch, phone in hand, talking too fast, moving too aggressively. His body language screamed panic. I watched from the car, engine off, a quiet observer of his unraveling. From what I'd heard around town, Daniel had quit his job at the firm or been fired, depending on who told the story. Apparently, he'd used company funds to secure a bridge loan to buy back the house, convinced he could reverse the sale somehow. The deal fell apart, the company investigated, and suddenly, Daniel Cole wasn't a respected financial advisor anymore. He was a liability. Emily didn't know the full extent yet, but she would soon. I should have felt satisfaction. I didn't. Not exactly. Revenge isn't sweet. It's quiet. Cold. It leaves you staring at the ruins, wondering if the silence was worth it. That night, I stayed at a diner until late, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Rita, noticed my restless hands. "You look like a man waiting for a storm," she said softly. "Maybe," I replied. "But sometimes the storm's already passed, and you just can't stop listening to the thunder." She gave me a small, knowing smile. "Then maybe it's time to go home." "Home's gone," I said. "Then build a new one." The next morning, I received an envelope at the motel front desk. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Emily, standing outside her apartment building, holding her son's hand. A little boy, maybe 6, with bright blue eyes that reminded me of Margaret. I hadn't even known she'd had a child. My throat tightened. On the back of the photo, a few words in Emily's handwriting. "His name is Jacob. He keeps asking about Grandpa. I told him you're building him something special." Tears blurred the edges of the paper. I hadn't cried in years. But that morning I did. Because suddenly, My revenge felt too small for the love that still existed beyond it. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window, the photo trembling in my hands. Daniel could lose his job, his reputation, even his pride, but I couldn't let him destroy Emily's spirit or her son's childhood. I wiped my eyes and whispered to Margaret's memory. I did what I had to do, but maybe it's time to do what's right. That night, I packed again, but this time, not to run. I was going to see my grandson. The next morning, I set out before dawn. The sky was a heavy gray, like the world hadn't decided yet if it wanted to rain or shine. I drove with the photo of Emily and Jacob tucked into the dashboard, glancing at it every few miles. His little face reminded me of everything I thought I'd lost. The laughter, the warmth, the reason I'd built that house in the first place. By the time I reached the city, traffic had already started to thicken. The noise, the horns, the restless people, it all felt foreign to me now. I hadn't been part of this world for a while. I found their apartment easily enough. It was a modest brick building, one of those that looked fine on the outside but carried too many lives behind thin walls. I parked across the street and waited. Around 8, the door opened. Emily stepped out, holding Jacob's hand. He was exactly as I'd imagined, small, bright-eyed, wearing a backpack with a cartoon rocket on it. His steps bounced, full of energy and questions. Emily, though, looked drained. Even from across the street, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing back at the windows, afraid of what Daniel might see or say. They began walking toward the school at the end of the block. I got out of the truck, crossed the street slowly, and followed from a distance. Halfway there, Jacob dropped his pencil case. It rolled down the sidewalk, coming to a stop near my foot. He ran to pick it up, and then froze when our eyes met. "Sorry, mister," he said politely. I knelt down and handed it to him. "That's okay. You've got to keep your tools safe, huh?" He grinned, showing a missing front tooth. "Mom says that too." "Smart mom," I said softly. Emily turned then, and when she saw me crouched beside Jacob, her face went pale. "Dad," she whispered. I stood up slowly. "Morning, sweetheart." Her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide behind a tight smile. "You shouldn't be here." "Daniel." "I'm not here for him," I interrupted. "I'm here for my grandson." Jacob looked between us, confused. "Mom? Who's he?" Emily hesitated. Then, in a trembling voice, "Jacob, this is Grandpa." He blinked, then smiled wide, the kind of open, innocent smile that only children can give. "You make things, right? Mom said you build stuff." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "I used to. Haven't built much lately." He tugged on my sleeve. "Can you build me a rocket?" "Maybe something better," I said. Emily looked at me helplessly. "Dad, he doesn't know the whole story." "I'm not here to explain myself," I said. "I'm not here to cause trouble either. I just wanted to see him. Once." She swallowed hard, torn between fear and longing. Then she nodded. "There's a park 2 blocks away. We can talk there. Daniel's at work." The park was nearly empty, just a few joggers and the distant laughter of children on swings. We sat on a bench under a large oak tree. Jacob ran off to the sandbox, his laughter echoing across the quiet morning. Emily stared at her hands. "He doesn't remember much about you," she said softly. "He was only a baby when Mom passed." "I know," I said. "That's my fault." She shook her head. "No, it's not. I should have brought him to see you. But Daniel always said it would confuse him, that you were better off on your own." I clenched my jaw. "Daniel says a lot of things." "Dad?" She whispered. "He's different lately. Angry. Paranoid. He thinks everyone's out to humiliate him. He blames you for everything." I sighed. He's not entirely wrong. But I didn't take anything from him he didn't already lose himself. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind rustle through the leaves. "Why did you really sell the house?" she finally asked. "I mean, not the reason you told him, the real one." I thought for a moment. "Because I couldn't stand to see love rot under someone else's control. That house wasn't just walls. It was your mother's voice, your laughter, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. Daniel wanted to turn it into territory." Emily's eyes glistened. "I miss her." "I do too," I said softly. Every day, Jacob came running back, holding a handful of sand and a single feather. "Look, Grandpa. Treasure." I smiled and wiped his dirty hand with my handkerchief. "You've got a good eye, kid. That's a rare one, an explorer's feather." He laughed, then climbed onto the bench beside me. For the next hour, I listened to him talk about school, his favorite cartoons, and the dog he wanted to adopt. Every word stitched something back together inside me that I thought was lost forever. When it was time for them to go, Emily hugged me tightly, longer than I expected. "Thank you," she whispered, "for coming." I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "Take care of him, Em. And take care of yourself. Don't let him dim you anymore." She stepped back, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Where will you go now?" "Wherever there's wood to work and a sea to watch," I said with a faint smile. As they walked away, Jacob turned and waved, shouting, "Goodbye, Grandpa. Don't forget my rocket." I stood there long after they disappeared from sight, the sound of his laughter echoing in my ears. And for the first time since everything began, I didn't feel like I'd lost my home. I realized I'd simply carried it with me, in the form of a little boy who still believed I could build anything. But deep down, I knew Daniel wouldn't let things end so peacefully. He was the kind of man who couldn't stand to lose, even when he'd already destroyed everything worth winning. And soon, he'd come looking for me again. It happened 3 weeks later. I had found a small cabin near a quiet marina, a weathered place that smelled of pine, salt, and the faint sweetness of old varnish. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Mornings were spent repairing fishing nets for the locals, evenings carving little wooden toys for the kids who played by the docks. Peaceful, predictable, until that silver SUV appeared at the end of the gravel road. I was sanding down a small wooden sailboat when I heard the tires crunch on the gravel. I looked up, and even from 50 yards away, I recognized the arrogance of that vehicle. The sharp edges, the spotless polish, the kind of car that didn't belong anywhere near mud or salt. Daniel stepped out, wearing a navy suit despite the heat, his face flushed and tight with fury. I didn't move. I set the sandpaper down, wiped my hands on a rag, and waited. He stormed toward me, stopping just a few feet away. "You think this is funny, old man?" I sighed. "Hello, Daniel. Long drive?" He ignored the pleasantry. "You ruined my life. You destroyed everything I built." I tilted my head. "Everything you built? That's interesting. Because the last time I checked, you were still standing on someone else's foundation." His jaw clenched. "You had no right to sell that house." "I had every right," I said calmly. "It was mine, paid for with my blood and calluses. The right was in my name, and you made sure to remind me every time you called it your plan." He pointed a finger at me. "You've turned Emily against me. You've poisoned her mind." "I didn't poison anything," I replied. "You just hate mirrors, Daniel. You can't stand when someone shows you who you really are." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind pushing through the reeds and the distant crash of waves. Then, with sudden violence, Daniel slammed his fist on my workbench, scattering wood shavings and tools. "You think this is over? You think running away makes you noble? You're a coward hiding behind pity." I met his eyes that once charmed my daughter, now hollow and desperate. "No, Daniel. You mistake peace for cowardice. You confuse silence with surrender." He laughed bitterly. "You don't even realize what you've done. I lost my job, my reputation." "You did that yourself," I said quietly. "Greed and pride don't need my help to destroy a man." His breath came faster, the mask of confidence slipping. For the first time, I saw something behind his anger, fear. Not of me, but of losing control. "You don't deserve her loyalty," he spat. "You've always made her weak." I felt my chest tighten. "No, Daniel. I made her kind. You mistook kindness for weakness. And now she's learning the difference." He stepped closer, his voice low and venomous. "You think she'll thank you for this? When she's alone, when her son grows up without stability." "Better no stability than the wrong kind," I said. "Better an honest storm than a calm built on lies." Daniel's lips curled in disgust. "You're pathetic. An old man clinging to pride." I smiled faintly. "And yet you drove 3 hours to shout at me. Who's really clinging to pride?" His composure cracked. He slammed his palm against the bench again, sending the half-finished wooden boat flying into the dirt. "You think you've won?" "I didn't come here to win," I said. "I came here to remember who I am." He stared at me for a long time, eyes wide, chest heaving, sweat gathering on his temples. I thought for a moment he might strike me, but then something in him faltered. His shoulders dropped. "You're insane," he muttered. "Emily's going to realize what you are. A bitter old man who ran from his family." I took a step forward, steady, deliberate. "No, Daniel. I walked away to save what little was left of it. He froze, his expression flickering between anger and uncertainty. You think she'll forgive you? She already has, I said softly. The moment she stopped defending you. He blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. His hand twitched like he wanted to say something else, but the words didn't come. Instead, he turned sharply, stalked back to his car, and slammed the door so hard the echo rolled through the quiet marina. As he drove off, gravel spraying behind him, I stood there watching the dust settle. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what had just passed. When the road fell silent again, I looked down at the little wooden boat lying in the dirt. Its hull was cracked, the mast broken clean off. I picked it up gently, brushing away the dust. I can fix this, I murmured. And for some reason, those words made me smile. That evening, as the sun sank into the water, I carved another boat, smaller, sturdier, meant for small hands. I painted Jacob's name on the side in my careful, uneven handwriting. The next morning, I mailed it to Emily's apartment with a short note. For the boy who still believes in rockets and ships. From the man who's still learning how to build again. Then I sat on the porch, watching the tide roll in, feeling lighter than I had in months. But deep down, I knew this wasn't truly over. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who lost quietly. And if he couldn't ruin my life anymore, he'd try to ruin hers. The letter reached Emily a few days later. I didn't hear from her immediately, but when she finally called, her voice trembled like a candle in the wind. Dad? She whispered. He found it. The package with Jacob's name. I froze. Daniel? Yes. Her breath hitched. He opened it before I got home. He saw your handwriting, and he lost it. Said you were manipulating Jacob. Said you were trying to turn him against his own father. I felt my hand tighten around the receiver. Where are you now? In the bedroom. He's in the living room, drinking. A pause, then a faint sob. Dad, he's not the same. He's angry all the time. At work, at me, at Jacob. I don't know what to do. Listen to me carefully. I said, my voice low, steady. Take Jacob and leave. Tonight. Go to a friend's, a motel, anywhere safe. I can't, she whispered. He said if I walk out, he'll call the police. He'll tell them, you stole the money from the sale. I closed my eyes. So that was his next move. Emily, I said softly, there's something you don't know. I set everything up legally. The money from the sale isn't in my name. It's in a trust, your mother's trust. Your name is on it, not mine. She went silent. Then a broken whisper. You did that for me? For you? I said. And for Jacob. Because I knew this day would come. Through the line, I heard a crash, glass shattering. Daniel's voice, sharp and slurred. Who are you talking to? Give me the phone. Emily, I barked. Get Jacob and go. The line went dead. I drove through the night. The storm rolled in as I left the coast, wind and rain hammering the windshield like fists. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Every mile felt longer than the last. When I reached the city, dawn was only a gray smear on the horizon. The apartment complex loomed ahead, tall, lifeless, its windows reflecting the first pale light. I parked by the curb and ran inside, my shoes tracking rainwater through the hallway. The elevator was too slow, so I took the stairs. My lungs burned, my heart pounding harder than it had in years. When I reached the third floor, I heard shouting. A man's voice, furious, echoing down the hallway. And then a child's cry. I didn't think. I kicked the door. It flew open with a crack that shook the frame. Daniel spun toward me, his face twisted, eyes red from drink and rage. Emily stood near the wall, shielding Jacob behind her. A broken lamp lay on the floor, light flickering. You, Daniel hissed. You just couldn't stay away. Step away from them, I said. He laughed, a low, ugly sound. You think you're some kind of hero? You ruin my career, steal my home, my wife. You did that yourself, I interrupted, taking a slow step forward. Don't you talk to me like that. He grabbed a glass from the table and hurled it. It shattered against the wall beside me, shards raining to the floor. Stop, Emily cried. But he didn't stop. He lunged toward me, his fist swinging wildly. It caught me on the shoulder, pain flared, but I didn't fall. Years of labor had built bones stronger than his expensive gym could ever forge. I pushed him back, not out of rage but instinct. He stumbled, slipping on the spilled drink, his arm catching the edge of the broken coffee table. For a second, everything froze, his breath, my heartbeat, Emily's scream. Then he collapsed, groaning, clutching his wrist. I stood over him, chest heaving. "Look at yourself, Daniel," I said quietly. "This is what control looks like when it slips." Emily rushed to Jacob, pulling him close, whispering soothing words. The boy clung to her, eyes wide, silent tears streaking his cheeks. Daniel's voice cracked. "You think this makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "It just proves I was right to leave." I turned to Emily. "Pack your things. You're coming with me." She hesitated. "What about him?" I looked down at Daniel, broken, furious, and pitiful all at once. "He's already somewhere I can't reach. Let the law deal with him." By evening, we were back on the road. Emily sat in the passenger seat, Jacob asleep in the back, his small hand clutching the wooden boat I'd sent him. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Emily whispered, "He's not going to stop, is he?" "No," I said. "But he's not the man he used to be. He's cornered now, and men like him destroy themselves faster than anyone else ever could." She looked at me, eyes tired but steady. "What happens now?" I smiled faintly. "Now we start over." "Where?" "Anywhere," I said, "as long as it's somewhere quiet. Somewhere Jacob can play outside. Somewhere your mother would have smiled to see." The road stretched out ahead, golden light breaking through the clouds. Emily reached over and took my hand. "Thank you, Dad." "For what?" "For coming back." I squeezed her hand gently. "I never really left, sweetheart. I was just waiting for you to find your way out of his shadow." She smiled through her tears, and for the first time in years, I saw her face the way it used to be, soft, alive, free. In the rearview mirror, Jacob stirred, murmuring in his sleep. "Grandpa Rocket." I chuckled quietly. "We'll build it soon, kiddo." And as the city disappeared behind us, replaced by open sky and the promise of something new, I realized that revenge hadn't taken anything from me at all. It had simply led me back to what truly mattered, my family. But even peace has a price. And I knew, somewhere out there, Daniel was plotting his next move. For a while, peace felt real. Emily, Jacob, and I settled in a small town near the mountains, a place where the mornings smelled like pine and the evenings hummed with crickets. I rented a small cottage with a workshop out back. Jacob spent his afternoons there, hammering tiny nails into scraps of wood while I guided his hands. Emily got a job at the local school library. She smiled again, that quiet, tired, but genuine kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. It almost felt like the world had decided to forgive us. Almost. The first sign came on a Sunday morning. I went out to fetch the paper, and there it was, a black SUV parked across the street, engine idling. My pulse jumped before my mind caught up. But when I walked closer, the driver rolled down the window. Not Daniel, just a stranger with dark glasses, looking at his phone. Still, something about the car, the brand, the color, sent an old ache crawling up my spine. That night, I dreamed of Daniel, his voice echoing, "You think this is over?" I woke before dawn, sweat on my back, the sound of rain tapping the window. For days, nothing happened, but the feeling lingered, like the air before a storm. Then one afternoon, Emily came home pale and shaking. "Dad," he called me. I froze mid-step. "Daniel." She nodded, clutching her phone like it might burn her. "He said he's sorry, that he's changed. He wants to see Jacob. He said he's been in therapy, trying to fix things." I felt the old anger stir in my chest. "And you believe him?" "No," she said softly. But I heard something in his voice. He sounded desperate, not angry, just empty. Desperation and guilt are not the same thing, I warned. She sat at the kitchen table, her eyes distant. "He said he knows where we are." That sentence landed like a hammer. I looked toward the window, the curtains half drawn, and felt that old unease crawl back under my skin. The next few days were a test of patience. We went about our lives carefully, quietly. I walked Jacob to school, keeping an eye on every passing car. Emily avoided her social media, stopped answering unknown numbers. But on the fifth evening, as I was closing up the workshop, I saw it again. The black SUV, parked by the tree line, half hidden behind the pines. I didn't call the police. Men like Daniel knew how to make everything look harmless. A visit from the cops would only fuel his obsession. Instead, I waited. The sun went down, and I turned off the lights, standing by the window, watching the faint glow of his headlights through the trees. Hours passed. Midnight came. Then, finally, The engine started, and the SUV disappeared down the road. For the next 2 nights, I barely slept. On the third night, there was a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Emily stirred from the couch. "Who is it?" I motioned for her to stay back. "Go to Jacob's room," I whispered. "Lock the door." She hesitated, eyes wide, but obeyed. I opened the drawer, pulled out the old wrench I used for repairs, and moved quietly toward the door. Another knock. I opened it. Daniel stood there, soaked in rain, his suit clinging to him like a second skin. His eyes were bloodshot, hollow. He looked thinner, older. "Evening," I said coldly. He smiled weakly. "You always did have good taste in hiding places." "What do you want, Daniel?" "I just want to talk. Talk somewhere else." He stepped forward, but I blocked the doorway. "Please," he said, voice cracking. "I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my family. I need to see my son." I studied him. For the first time, he didn't look like the predator I'd known. He looked like a man who'd been eaten alive by his own pride. "Jacob's asleep," I said. "You should go. Just 5 minutes," he begged. "Please, Tom. I've been sober for 3 months. I've got nothing left but him." Something in his tone made me pause. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe guilt, or maybe, just maybe, a trace of truth. I sighed. "Wait here." I went to Emily's room. She was standing by the window, listening. "He's outside," I said quietly. "He wants to see Jacob." Her face went white. "No, absolutely not." "I know," I said. "But listen to me. This has to end, one way or another. Either he faces what he's done, or he'll keep chasing ghosts." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't face him again, Dad." "You won't have to. I will." I stepped back onto the porch. Daniel was still there, rain dripping from his hair, his hands trembling slightly. "Do you even know what you've done to her?" I asked. He looked down. "I know," he whispered. "I ruined everything. I thought if I could control it all, I could keep from losing it. But control was all I ever loved." The honesty in his voice startled me. He looked up, eyes glistening. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to be a father again." "You were never one," I said quietly. "You were a dictator in a suit. You used people until they broke." "I know," he said. "And I broke too." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain softened into drizzle. Somewhere behind the house, a dog barked once, then silence again. "Finally," I said, "if you want to be part of Jacob's life, you start by letting go. You don't show up uninvited. You don't make demands. You rebuild yourself without them." He nodded slowly, tears mixing with the rain. "I don't know how." "Start by leaving," I said. "For good." He looked at me, as if searching for one last ounce of mercy. "You really think I can change?" "I think anyone can," I said. "But not here. Not tonight." He took a shaky breath, stepped back, and looked toward the window where Emily's shadow faintly moved behind the curtain. Then he turned, walked to his car, and drove away. I stood there until the sound of his engine faded into the mountains. When I went back inside, Emily was crying silently, Jacob asleep in her arms. She looked up at me, eyes full of both fear and relief. "Is it over?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "For now." But as I looked out into the wet darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't gone, only circling farther away, waiting for one last crash before it cleared for good. For a few blessed weeks after that night, the world went quiet again. The rain stopped, the roads dried, and Jacob filled the house with laughter. He'd started calling me Grandpa Tom in his bright morning voice, and every time he said it, the ache in my chest softened a little more. Emily seemed lighter too. She baked again, read bedtime stories, hummed while washing dishes. We were rebuilding, not grandly, not perfectly, but piece by piece. Then came the letter. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front. Inside was a single page, folded twice. "You were right, Tom. Some storms don't pass. They just change direction. I'm sorry. I tried to fix things, but the world doesn't forgive men like me. Tell Emily I'm proud of her, even if I never showed it. Tell Jacob I wish I'd been better. Daniel." I read it twice, then a third time. The ink was smudged in places, as if written in the rain or by an unsteady hand. Something about it didn't sit right. It wasn't just guilt. It sounded like goodbye. I didn't tell Emily right away. I spent the rest of the day pretending everything was normal, fixing the back fence, helping Jacob build a wooden rocket he'd drawn himself. But that night, long after they'd gone to sleep, I drove. The letter's postmark was from a nearby town, 2 hours south, near the river. I told myself I just wanted to make sure. That's all. Just make sure. The motel wasn't hard to find. Crescent Pines. A sad little place that smelled of cigarettes and mold. The clerk, a heavy man with a thin mustache, frowned when I showed him the letter. Yeah, he was here, he said. Checked in 2 nights ago. Room 7. Left yesterday morning. Didn't take much with him. Did he say where he was going? The clerk shrugged. No, but he left this behind. He reached under the counter and pulled out a gold wedding ring. Inside, faint engraving read E&D, 2012. My stomach sank. I drove to the river before dawn. The air was cold and still. The sky a pale gray, heavy with silence. Halfway down the muddy bank, I saw it, a familiar black SUV, parked crooked by the water. Driver's door open. No one inside. I walked closer, my heart thudding louder with each step. The keys were still in the ignition. On the seat lay a half-empty bottle, and next to it, a folded note. I wasn't built for forgiveness. Tell her I finally learned how to let go. The world blurred. The river roared softly below, dark and endless. I called the sheriff's office. They came within the hour, lights flashing, radios buzzing. I watched from a distance as they searched the banks, voices muffled by the wind. By noon, they found what I already knew they would. Daniel Cole was gone. When I got home, Emily was waiting on the porch. She must have seen it in my face before I said a word. Her hands flew to her mouth, and her knees buckled. I caught her before she fell. No, she whispered. No, no, no. I held her as she cried, great, shaking sobs that came from the deepest part of her. Jacob stood in the doorway, confused, clutching his rocket. Where's Mommy crying? He asked softly. She just misses someone, I said gently. He came closer, his little brow furrowed. Is it the bad man? Emily turned away, her face breaking again. That night, she sat at the kitchen table long after Jacob fell asleep. The ring I'd brought back lay between us. I hated him, she said quietly. But I never wanted this. I know, I said. She wiped her eyes. He was cruel, but he was also lost. And part of me kept hoping he'd change. I nodded. Hope can be a heavy thing to carry. Do you think he meant what he wrote? She asked. About being proud of me? Yes, I said after a pause. For once, I think he did. We sat there in silence, the sound of rain tapping against the window, gentle this time, almost tender. In the days that followed, word spread quietly. The authorities ruled it as an accident, though we all knew better. There was no funeral, just paperwork and questions no one wanted to answer. Emily took a leave from work. I stayed close, fixing small things around the house, cooking breakfast, keeping Jacob busy. One evening, I found her sitting by the window, holding the wooden boat I'd made for Jacob. He keeps this by his bed, she said, smiling faintly. Says it reminds him of you. Smart kid, I said. She looked at me, her eyes soft but tired. You know, for all the pain, I think you saved us. Maybe not the way I wanted, but in the only way anyone could have. I looked out at the fading light over the mountains. Maybe, or maybe I just gave fate a little push. We sat in silence again, listening to Jacob's laughter drift from the other room, a sound that somehow still managed to heal everything it touched. That night, I dreamed of the river, of Daniel standing on the bank, looking out into the current. But his face wasn't angry anymore, just calm, like he had finally stopped fighting. When I woke, I went outside and watched the sunrise spill over the hills. The air smelled like pine and new beginnings. Revenge had led me here, through betrayal, grief, and loss. But in the end, it wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about reclaiming peace. And maybe, just maybe, Daniel had found his too. It's strange how quiet life becomes once the storms are gone. No shouting, no calls in the middle of the night, no lawyers or police. Just silence, the kind that used to scare me but now feels like an old friend. A month had passed since Daniel's death. The days slipped by softly, one folding into the next like the turning of thin paper. Emily was healing slowly. Some mornings she smiled without realizing it. Others, she stared out the window too long, lost in memories she couldn't quite untangle. Jacob kept us alive. His laughter filled every empty space that grief tried to swallow. He built towers from scrap wood in my workshop, painted them in bright colors, and said they were rocket homes for brave people. I like that. Rocket homes. Homes that could fly away from sadness. I had one last thing to do before I could truly rest. That evening, I sat at my old desk, the same one that had followed me from the house I'd built decades ago. The grain was worn smooth by years of letters, sketches, and mistakes. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began to write. Dear Jacob, if you're reading this, it means you're old enough to understand that sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. Not at first. When I was your age, I thought good and bad were clear things, like day and night. I thought people were one or the other. But life isn't that simple. Sometimes, good men make bad choices because they're afraid. And bad men have moments where they wish they could be good again. Your father was both. He loved you in a way he didn't know how to show. He wanted control because he thought control was safety. I used to be like that too. It took me many years and a lot of loss to learn that real strength isn't holding on. It's knowing when to let go. I made mistakes too. I let anger guide me when love should have. But if I hadn't walked away, I might have lost myself completely. And then I wouldn't have found you. You saved me, Jacob. You reminded me that building isn't just about wood and nails. It's about hearts, about people, about second chances. So promise me something, kiddo. Build your life carefully, but don't be afraid when things break. Sometimes, breaking is how the light gets in. I've left my old tools for you. One day, when your hands are strong enough, use them to build something beautiful, not just with wood, but with kindness. That's the kind of house that never falls apart. And when you see rockets, remember your old grandpa who believed in them too. With all my love, Grandpa Tom. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a wooden box I'd carved for him. Smooth oak, simple, sturdy. On the lid, I engraved a single word, legacy. The next morning, I gave it to Emily. Don't open it, I said. Not yet. Give it to him when he's ready, when he's old enough to ask why. She ran her fingers over the carved letters, eyes glistening. You're leaving, aren't you? I nodded slowly. Just for a while. There's a small town by the lake that needs a carpenter. Thought I'd lend a hand. She tried to smile, but her voice cracked. You don't have to go, Dad. We need you. I reached out and touched her cheek. You don't need me, not like before. You have your own life to build now. I need to see what peace looks like when it's quiet. She hugged me then, tighter than she ever had before. You gave me back my life, she whispered. And Jacob's. Thank you. I held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, the scent of home. No, I said softly. You saved yourself. I just cleared the road. Jacob ran out of the house as I loaded the last box into the truck. Grandpa, you forgot your boat. He held out the little wooden sailboat I'd fixed after Daniel broke it. I smiled and knelt down. That one's yours now, Captain. Keep it close. It's good luck. He nodded solemnly, like a tiny sailor accepting command. Will I see you again? Of course, I said. The wind always brings Grandpa's back. He giggled and hugged me hard. I love you. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I love you too, kiddo. To the moon and back. As I drove away, the cottage grew smaller in the mirror. Emily waving from the porch, Jacob holding the boat against his chest. For a moment, everything I'd ever lost and everything I'd ever loved seemed to blur into one image. Imperfect, painful, and beautiful all at once. Now, as I write these last lines from a quiet cabin by the lake, I can finally say it. I'm not angry anymore. Life took things from me, my wife, my home, my pride. But it gave me something greater in return, the chance to build peace from the ruins. And that's all I ever wanted. The lake is still tonight. The stars ripple across the water like they're trying to reach the other side. Somewhere out there, Emily and Jacob are sleeping peacefully. Maybe Jacob's dreaming of rockets again. Maybe he'll build one someday, and maybe, just maybe, it'll carry my memory with him. I close my eyes, listening to the quiet. For the first time in years, I feel Margaret beside me again, not as a ghost, but as a warmth in the wind. I whisper, I did it, love. I brought them home. And the lake, soft and endless, carries the echo away.